Hello, I am Dr. Jennifer Tanner. I am the founder of Run Well, the Summit for Runners' Health and Performance. So some of you may have seen the Netflix show Game Changer. Some of you might be following the Know Me Athlete, but wherever you're getting your information from, it definitely seems like there's a lot more attention going towards plant-based medicine. So this is why we have brought on today's guest. We are talking all about plants and how you can do it in a healthy and safe manner. I'm vegetarian, so I'm always looking to make sure that I'm eating healthy, I'm eating balanced, because although it tends to be a great choice for health, there's a lot of ways to do it where it becomes not a great choice for health. So today we have Dr. Hussain. She's a naturopathic doctor in Aurora. Her approach to healthcare is plant-based. She includes whole foods, herbs, strategic supplements, and acupuncture, and her main clinical focuses are thyroid and hormone support. She's also really interesting as saxophone player and a fellow chocolate lover. So welcome, Anne. How are you?
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, so big question. Is it possible to be vegan or vegetarian and still be athletic?
Of course. So
Okay.
if people have seen the Game Changers movie, that was a huge premise of it, that you can be athletic and be on a plant-based diet. With documentaries, you always have to take them with a grain of salt because they are showing a very biased perspective. However, it is totally possible. You just have to really listen to your body. There's lots of elite athletes who are vegan, like Venus Williams went vegan like a few years ago for her health. Morgan Mitchell, the runner. There's the no meat athlete who's the long distance runner, Matt Fraser. So there's lots of male and female athletes who are plant-based and they do it well and they eat well. It really comes down to listening to your body. What is it telling you? Altering your diet and hopefully working with someone who knows what they're talking about, and then creating a plan that provides you with all the nutrients that you need for performance and for recovery. So that's really what it comes down to, but I think it's totally possible. I've been plant-based for over 12 years. I changed my life with plant-based foods. I had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is why I focus on those areas in my practice. Yeah, because that's how I healed my health. And also, I from a compassionate side, and so I love teaching people to eat more plant-based. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm converting people to be vegetarian or vegan, but plant foods give you the complement of nutrients and antioxidants and minerals that you don't get from animal foods. So it's really important to incorporate a variety of different plant foods.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the benefits of being plant-based? Like you just mentioned antioxidants there. What else?
Yeah, so what I always say is like you can live without animal foods, but you can't really live without plant foods because that's what I like to say, because you can get the complement of protein and healthy fats and fiber and carbs that you need for a functioning body from all plant foods. Obviously, you need to be strategic about what kinds of foods you're having. The variety is always key, but the benefits, from a vitamin and mineral perspective, you can get everything from plant foods. You get a ton of fiber, which is really important for not just our gut health, but also our hormonal health and inflammation. You can support, and then even if we look at all our therapeutic herbs, those are all plants. So there's lots of therapeutic benefits from that you can get from plant foods. And then now there's more light being shed on the environmental impact and the compassionate side of that as well. Ultimately, it's a personal choice if someone wants to be plant-based, and plant-based doesn't necessarily have to mean completely vegetarian or vegan. It could be plant-focused or plant-centric. And that really is, I feel like, even as naturopaths in general, we're trying to move people in that direction to eating more plant foods. Because if we look at research, even the people who live the longest and have the least amounts of disease are people who eat primarily plant.
Okay. Yeah, I like that stat. Do you feel like You can do plant-based, but not have to take supplements. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean by that? Like, can
I do.
you supplement
Yeah, I think you can. However, yeah, so like the common deficiencies that we talk about with plant-based are iron and B12, like those are the big two. But honestly, like a lot of my patient population is not plant-based and everyone's low in iron and B12.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the foods we're eating, but also the state of our digestive system because we have to actually absorb those nutrients, right? So I feel like B12 and also vitamin D, especially in the Canadian population, vitamin D is, I rarely ever see normal vitamin D. I would say 90% of my patient population when we tested, they're low. So especially at this time of the year in the winter. So yeah, so some supplementation becomes important, but I would test before we do that. So iron, B12, vitamin D, and iron doesn't necessarily have to be supplemented. I increase iron stores. Like I have a genetic form of anemia and my iron never came up on any kind of iron supplements. So when I changed my diet, fixed my gut, that's when my iron started coming up personally. And same thing with B12. My B12 was always terrible growing up. But when I switched my diet, for me, my B12 actually started normalizing at that point of time. But I think a part of that was I was in an inflammatory state. Once I fixed my body a little bit, it changed. So supplementation doesn't also need to be every single day. Iron supplementation is better. Iron is better absorbed when you take it every other day. Vitamin B12, you can do injections. You can do, sublingual tablets or liquids. You can also get it through certain foods, like nutritional yeast has certain small amounts. Some mushrooms have small amounts. However, usually people do need to supplement some of those things, but that goes for, I would say, everybody, regardless of whether they're plant-based or not.
Okay. So for somebody who hasn't used nutritional yeast, do you have a favorite recipe for using it?
Oh, yes. I have lots of
Oh,
recipes for nutritional yeast. So my favorite one is like a topper. It's kind of like a Parmesan almost.
Okay.
You can find one in or walnuts if you're not allergic to nuts. You put in some nutritional yeast and then salt, pepper, onion powder, paprika, and I'm missing something, and turmeric. So it becomes, and then you just I use a mortar and pestle, although you can put it into a grinder of some kind, and then it becomes this crumbly powder that flavors anything that you want. You can put it on salads, you can put it on pasta. My husband loves putting it on pasta. So that's one of my favorite nutritional yeast recipes. Although, I also put it in, if I'm making a risotto, I'll throw it in there. If I'm making what else do we'll just put it in regular pasta sauce if we're being lazy and we don't want to make the crumbly mix. Yeah.
My favorite is to add it to popcorn. I'll use coconut oil and then I'll do salt and turmeric and some nutritional yeast. And then it kind of tastes like smart food. It's kind of like
yeah, it does.
Yeah. I love it.
So, I don't eat much corn anymore, but I used to love doing that.
Is your partner plant-based?
He is. So we both went plant-based together many years ago, 12 years ago to be exact. Yeah. He switched over from a standard North American diet to being plant-based, also driven by compassion and health.
The standard American diet makes me laugh because the acronym is SAD, and it very is sad.
I know.
So if you're looking at plant-based, do you have any tips for somebody who's gradually getting into it or looking at doing it, but everyone else in their family are still pure carnivores? Do you have any strategies for implementing that into the household?
Yeah, so it's, and I have these conversations with patients all the time. I have a lot of mothers or parents who bring in their kids who are recently, who have recently adopted a more plant-based diet, and they're worried about getting enough nutrients and how to transition and how to make different foods. Ultimately, whomever is doing it, they need to be responsible for their food choices. So it can't just be, hey mom, make me this. It has to be, well, how can I help? Let me help you. Can I go to the grocery store with you and get foods that I like? So it's about, so vegetable, usually when people start becoming plant-based, they are very carb-centric. So being a little bit more cognizant about getting hummus. Hummus is super easy. and having easily accessible foods. Like I do a lot of granola personally, because granola, you don't have to cook it. Like anyone can put it together, whether they're male, female, young, old, and they
Yeah.
can pack it with a lot of nutrition, right? Nuts, seeds, oats. You can throw in some chocolate chips, which is my favorite thing to add in. So, it has to be a conversation between the family members. Like, why are we doing this? How can we support each other? Because it can't be done in isolation.
Mhm.
Because if we're eating as a family unit, there needs to be options for everybody, and creating this atmosphere of inclusivity. So there needs to be responsibility that is taken, and also open-mindedness.
Yeah. And in our family, we've almost reversed it. So I am plant-based, but nobody else in my family
Yeah.
is solely plant-based. So
Okay.
we've almost reversed it. Instead of the vegetables being the side, it's more the
Yeah.
meat products are now the side. So the majority of what we are eating are fruits and vegetables and beans and nuts and legumes and those sorts of things. And then there's usually, for the rest of the family, um, there's some sort of meat product. And that's not every day. Most of the time, I'd say they're probably eating 70% plant-based. And then they've got the occasional uh, chicken or turkey or steak or whatever's on the menu
Yeah, and that's a
that day.
yeah, and that's a great way to look at it, right? Like you have primarily vegetables, and then you have the animal protein, or any other protein on the side, because plants are good for everybody. So
Yeah.
that becomes a lot easier of a transition too.
Yeah. And for those of you that are in Canada, I don't know if anyone's seen the new Canada Food Guide. What do you think of it, Anne?
So definitely a move in the right direction. Right, like more vegetables and fruits. Like I feel like we all know this,
Yeah.
but having it be reflected in there is quite nice. And then a shift towards less dairy. And then I'm sure in your experience, and definitely in my experience, I find that dairy can be quite inflammatory for a lot of people, and they have
Mhm.
difficulty digesting it.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the lactose that's in the dairy, but it's also about the casein and the other proteins that are in there. So sometimes people think that drinking lactose-free or having lactose-free dairy is better, but they're still getting the
Mhm.
symptoms. So I do like that. And then honestly, I feel like most people need some guidance in their diet and nutrition. There's so much information out there. So seeing a qualified professional really goes a long way. And that could be done as a family unit to
Mhm.
find a solution that works for everybody. And that can also be done on an individual basis, because the more you learn about certain foods, the more your psychology becomes wired to like those foods also.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any go-to recipe sites?
Go-to recipe sites. Honestly, I'm a big experimenter.
Okay, so you
So
are the
I
recipe
do a
eater.
lot of, yeah. So, well, I like my own website. I post some
Oh,
websites,
well, okay.
some
What's
recipes
your
on
website?
my own. So my website is www.annhussain.com. I haven't posted on there in a while because I've been doing a website revamp, but there will be new recipes in the future. A lot of mine are actually dessert recipes because I love chocolate.
Ah! Well, I'm sure you
So,
get a lot
but there a
of
lot.
because he doesn't love chocolate.
It's true. There's very few people I know who don't love chocolate, but a lot of them are like good combinations. So there's like a chocolate avocado pudding that is a fan favorite. Like all my patients like love that chocolate avocado pudding recipe. And same thing with the granola. I like doing things that are easy, that don't require a lot of time. Most people are on the go. They want to
Yeah.
have something quick that they can, put together in within 15 minutes or less. So a lot of my recipes are like that because
Mhm.
I'm like that. So I like
I think
that.
people
What else
appreciate
do I
that.
like? Yeah, and there's lots of other, like, even if we look at like Oshi Glow, she has tons of like
Yeah,
plant-based recipes
fabulous.
in there. I
Her
Yeah, I
energy
like her a
balls.
lot. Yes, Joyous Health, she has tons of recipes. Our colleague, Dr. Rachel Schwartzman, she puts up a lot of recipes on her social media. So like those are some of my go-tos personally, if I'm
Yeah,
like looking for some inspiration or something different.
nice. So I believe you prepared a slide. Why don't we pull that up and then we could talk about, you
Hmm.
mentioned before some of the things that might be, um, the nutrients that might be deficient, but maybe we could talk about some of the
Hmm.
symptoms that go along with that too.
Absolutely. Okay. So my biggest thing especially when people are transitioning into a plant-based diet, is take note of your symptoms. Like, you have to be the expert on your body and what it feels like. And I'm sure, Jen, you get this as well, where you ask a patient in an initial appointment, for example, that do you experience gas or bloating? And they're like, yeah, occasionally. And then they come back 2 weeks later, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had gas and bloating every single day. So the more we, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
Very
so
common
really
culprit.
paying attention. Yes. So really paying attention to the body and the changes that you're experiencing. If you're feeling more fatigued, take note of that. If you're feeling more amazing, take note of that. If
Yeah.
you're having more constipation or like muscle recovery is slower, like those are all things that should be investigated, because maybe we're not getting something that we really need. And there's also an adaptation period, right? Our body has been accustomed to utilizing certain kinds of nutrients, and then it's now getting a different set of nutrients. So we just need to make sure that we're covering all our bases. So if we're looking at this blood work here, let me just try to make this full screen. So this is my like very basic for anybody blood work. So complete blood cell count, ferritin and B12. So ferritin reflects our iron stores, and B12, thyroid panel. I do a full thyroid panel, and vitamin D. And all those four things can look very similar. So like that could be fatigue, low mood, hair loss, restless legs, slowed down muscle recovery, poor sleep, a little bit of anxiety, maybe even. So those, whenever we see those kinds of symptoms, definitely looking at that panel, like of the top five on my list there.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Those can be really helpful. And then also just general investigations into how your liver is functioning, how your kidneys functioning, what your blood sugar is looking like, because oftentimes when people are switching to plant-based, their overall macronutrient profile changes to being slightly carb heavy, especially at the beginning, I find, as people are still trying to navigate their way through their diet. So blood sugar markers, inflammation markers, and then cholesterol panel becomes important as well for runners, like serum electrolytes, and then hormones for anyone. So hormonal changes can be common as well in people, especially in runners who are doing long distance, more endurance kind of activities, as the nutritional level and energy deficit versus replenishment changes. So those are some of the blood work that I like to look at, but ultimately it really is about a before and after picture. What changes are you noticing over time, and how can we support those?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Looking at like the top five there, fatigue being one of the big symptoms that can come into play. So something for people to watch out for. And I like what you said, how when people start to switch over, when they drop meat, they don't always replace it with a plant-based protein. So it ends up being just a lot of carbs that we're consuming. So really watching that and looking for some balances. Now, how do you feel about somebody who says, I'm eating beans as kind of a meat replacement, but I don't feel well, like it makes me gassy?
So sometimes that's a digestive issue. Oftentimes it's a digestive issue, but it can also be a preparation issue. So if there can be anti-nutrients in some of those lentils and legumes, and soaking them in some apple cider vinegar and pressure cooking them really helps with the digestive portion of that. So I oftentimes will encourage, I could be a spokesperson for Instant Pot maybe.
Oh yeah, very popular.
Yeah, so gets people to just change their cooking styles versus eating from a can, because you're also getting some of those preservatives that are in there, and they're not cooked the same way. So that's one option. And then also really looking at digestion and as to how we can support that. Because when we are having more beans and lentils and legumes, then the protein and carb content versus just having animal protein, that's changed. So we need to make sure that we're making the appropriate enzymes to digest those foods.
Okay, beautiful. Now, I was just listening to a research podcast the other day, and they were talking about this particular subject and how they had discovered through their process that you can build up a tolerance. So in this case, they had the participants start. About 60% of the participants had pretty extreme levels of gas when they were eating select beans. And then they broke it down. So they gave them 2 tablespoons exposure every day. And over time, it started. So by a month, I believe it was over half were symptom free, basically. And then by 8 weeks, they were down to 3% of the people were experiencing discomfort after. So you can build up a tolerance. So don't be completely discouraged if that's something that happens initially. And I believe the beans they were talking about, it was navy beans were one of the biggest culprits, and pinto beans were one of the easiest on your tummy. So that might be a nice place to start if somebody's new.
Yeah, and we see this in so many different areas too, right, Jen? We see it in our immune system, like low dose immunotherapy can be really helpful. You build a tolerance to foods as we train our bodies to process things a little bit differently. And we just train our bodies to act a little bit differently. So that's a cool study. I haven't heard of that, but but it makes complete sense.
I didn't write it down, and I'm going to look it up and figure it out because it was really interesting. Now, an interesting fact about Dr. Hussain is she spent some time treating people overseas. Can you give us a little brief, tell us a little bit about what you were doing?
Yeah, so I work with an organization called Naturopaths Without Borders, so similar to Doctor Borders. And they are a small nonprofit organization based out of the United States. So I volunteered with them for the first time when they were doing work in Haiti. So I was still in school at the time, and I did a 2-week externship with them. So they're serving underserved populations with naturopathic care. So with supplementation, with dietary changes, the great thing about Haiti was that they also made a compendium of herbs. So and taught locals like how to utilize these herbs for health. So for example, moringa, which some of you might have heard of, moringa is a very nutritious herb, and it grows everywhere where we were in Cap Haitian.
Oh wow! So you're able to monopolize that and use it.
Yes, so there's a lot of malnutrition there, and we were like, "Do you have so much moringa? Eat the moringa." So like using those things, and also teaching them stretches and things like, and doing acupuncture for them to support their health. Now I've transitioned into supervising students in Thailand. So northern Thailand, there are a variety of over 50 different hill tribe villages who are not considered Thai citizens, and they don't receive the health care that they need and deserve, simply because of their remote location and also due to their lack of citizen status. So there's a medical doctor who works there, so we've partnered with him, and we basically go to different communities and set up clinics, and we take a lot of supplements from here, and we do acupuncture and IVs, and teach them how to do their stretches, and talk about all the things to improve their health, along with the conventional medical side of it. So that's a cool, different than that NWB does. And they also do clinics in Rocky Point, Mexico, and they're always creating more partnerships.
I love it. I love that you've branched out to these outreach programs and been helping some communities in need. Yeah, especially with the plant-based approach as well, like you said with the moringa example. There's a lot kind of just growing in and around us that can be extremely beneficial. Now, you've put together, Anne has been super generous, and she's put together something called the Plant-Based Period Manual that will be available for you guys to link into at the end of this video. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So as you mentioned at the beginning, and I mentioned at the beginning, my area of focus is menstrual health, fertility, hormonal health. That's my world. And I'm really passionate about period literacy. I love teaching women about their menstrual cycle and how to tap into that. So this period manual basically goes through the phases of the cycle and how we can leverage our cycle in our life to perform better. And that's performance mentally, emotionally, physically, in all aspects, and how we can use diet and nutrition and exercise to support that. So it's basically just a small sheet of how to utilize your food to serve you better.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anne, for putting that together. One thing I want to touch on as well is a lot of times when I see people in practice and they're shifting away from those meats, they're trying to get more vegetarian type products in there, they end up having soya milk, tofu, edamame beans, tempeh. What's your take on soya products?
Okay, so this soy was really ostracized in the past for a variety of different reasons, and some of it is true. A lot of people are allergic to soy or can't tolerate soy, so that's one aspect you want to look at. If you don't tolerate it well,
Mm-hmm.
then limit it, please, for your own health, because otherwise it'll create inflammation.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, there are certain soy products that are better tolerated. So fermented soy like miso and tempeh, a
Mm-hmm.
lot easier on the body to digest, and the chemical composition of the actual compounds in there, it changes and it's more favorable and more bioavailable. Some of the unfermented products like tofu, for example, can, especially with someone with a thyroid condition, like I have Hashimoto, I have a history of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. The unfermented soy products can be a little bit more challenging and more inflammatory.
Okay.
So personally, I lean toward more of the fermented soy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, there are helpful phytoestrogens in soy. So phytoestrogens are compounds that look similar to estrogens and then can help regulate our estrogen receptor. So they can either, in perimenopause, they can support our estrogenic activity, and then in beforehand, it can actually decrease like high estrogen activity. So there are benefits to soy, but moderation becomes really important. So I lean more toward the fermented products than the non-fermented products.
Beautiful. So fermented like the tempeh would be a great
Yeah.
option. Wonderful. So
and edamame is fine too, in small amounts. Yeah, and preferably non-GMO and organic.
yes. Okay. Any last advice you want to give us?
Last advice I'll just say is, be aware of your body. If there's any changes that you're noticing consistently, bring it up with a healthcare practitioner, do your lab work. Iron-wise, there's lots of foods and teas that you can have. It doesn't always have to be supplements, but sometimes supplements are easy, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So just listen to your body. That's the biggest thing I feel like we always talk about.
Can you give us just a couple examples of some of those iron-rich foods?
Sure. One of my favorites is nettle tea, and that's an herb that grows in Ontario, stinging nettle. It's really iron rich, and it's also very calcium rich. So great for all phases of the menstrual cycle, but also great for women who might be slightly low on their bone mineral density.
Okay.
I love black sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds. From a Chinese medicine perspective, the purpley and red foods like beets and berries, like those are great at blood building as well. Blackstrap molasses. So those are some of my favorite iron boosting foods.
Yeah, the blackstrap molasses, I'll just put a spoon of that into my smoothie. Yeah, you don't need a lot. It's very powerful flavor.
Yeah.
You'll know if you've put too much of it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So one of my missions is to bring movement back to medicine. My other mission, I just love like positive vibes. So can you tell me something that just absolutely makes you laugh?
I'm a pretty easy audience, and I laugh quite easily.
Yes.
But one of my favorite things to do, especially with my husband or anybody really who'll humor me, is watch like little baby animal videos.
Oh my gosh.
That's one of my favorite things, especially when they're eating.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Really? That's your favorite part, the eating part. Nice. Too funny.
Yeah, because they chew so cutely.
I love it. Well, thank you for being on today. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
So I'm going to pull up a slide quickly because my contact information is on here.
Beautiful.
Let's see. There we go. So my plant-based spirit manual, we'll link to that. My website is myfullname.com, so www.annhussain.com. I'm active on Instagram and Facebook. Like I said, there's recipes on my website too, and I will update them more regularly in the new year.
We'll be on there
so that's how people can. Yeah, so people can get in touch with me like that. I'm always happy to hear from people. I feel like we all do. That's why we do what we do. We want to connect
Exactly.
with people and impact people.
Exactly. And for you listeners as well, we want you guys to have continued access to this. So link in after, and you'll see those options where you can view these videos endlessly, where you'll have access to Anne's manual that she's put together and some of the other things that our other speakers have presented as well. But thank you again for having us. Happy eating ever. Thank you again for joining us, I should say, and happy eating, everybody.